Leo, you coming down to see the list? My friend Caleb Vance's voice boomed from the doorway. I leaned against the window, shaking my head at the chaotic scene on the street below. You go ahead if you want. I'm going to sit this one out. Fine, have it your way. I'm going to go check it out. Caleb grinned, then disappeared down the stairs. I watched him go, then my eyes drifted to a group of men in sharp, dark suits waiting not far from the entrance to the building. Staffers from Senator Marshall's office. Chloe, this time I'll let you have him. My wife, Chloe Marshall, was the youngest daughter of the powerful senator from a storied political family. I, on the other hand, came from a quiet, middle-class family of academics in Ohio. Everyone told me how lucky I was to have married her, the jewel of the D.C. elite. For a long time, I believed it myself. I thought we had a perfect marriage, a true partnership. But her last words to me on her deathbed were, "If there's a next life, Leo, please don't stand in Caleb's way. Will you do that for me?" That was the moment I realized the man she'd loved was never me. Caleb was the opposite of me. He thrived in the center of the action. In my past life, before I could even protest, he had dragged me from the bar and down into the scrum. When the official register of new Foreign Service officers was posted, both of our names were on it and ranked high. As the top 2 candidates to pass the grueling exams, we were prime targets for the political families looking to scout promising new talent for their daughters. In the ensuing chaos, Caleb had pulled me through the crowd, dodging outstretched hands. But I wasn't as athletic as he was, and in a moment of distraction, I was cornered by Senator Marshall's men. I was escorted to the senator's office and met the man himself. The Marshall family had a long history of public service, stretching back generations, but their influence had begun to wane. In an era of shifting political tides, the senator was determined to pivot the family's legacy from its military roots toward the diplomatic corps. This whole elaborate ritual of scouting the register was part of his grand strategy. When he learned I had no prior commitments, my engagement to his daughter, Chloe, was sealed. "Brenda, get the top guy." The familiar voice snapped me back to the present. I looked across the street to the window of another restaurant. A young woman, Chloe's personal assistant, Brenda, was leaning out, shouting down to the men in suits. Just as I expected, I was number 3 this time. Caleb was number 1. I watched him weave through the crowd, deftly avoiding several attempts to grab him. The guy really was in good shape, but the prestige of being number 1 was a spotlight he couldn't escape. More and more people swarmed him. Amid a chorus of congratulations, I saw Senator Marshall's team finally catch him. Across the street, I saw Chloe break into a radiant smile. I felt nothing. No jealousy, no regret, just a quiet calm. "Michael, let's head back," I said to my assistant with a small smile. Caleb was dropped off at our apartment just as it was getting dark, practically vibrating with excitement. "Leo, do you know who that was?" "The Marshalls. Senator Marshall," he exclaimed, grabbing my arm. While Caleb's family had money, his father was just a small-town mayor. Marrying into the Marshall family would open doors he couldn't even imagine. "Well, congratulations are in order then, Caleb," I said. He looked at me, puzzled. "What? Are you psychic or something?" I shook my head, laughing. "I can see it on your face. You're clearly thrilled about the senator's daughter." "I only caught a glimpse of her," he said, a smug grin spreading across his face. "But judging by her mother's poise and grace, the daughter must be something special." I gave a non-committal nod. The senator, determined to forge a new path for his family, had spared no expense on Chloe's education and upbringing. "You're not engaged either, Leo. If you come down with me, who knows?" Caleb said, his voice tinged with a hint of pity. "That was your destiny, Caleb, not mine," I replied. "Besides, not every family scouting the register is the Marshalls." Caleb laughed. "I guess you're right. Never thought I'd get this lucky." The appointments of that year, 2025, were the first of the new president's term. Many of the people on that list with us would go on to become the most influential figures in our generation of foreign policy. In my first life, I didn't rank in the top 3, but with the Marshall family's influence, I secured a prestigious post in a fellowship program. This time, however, knowing the policy questions that would dominate the discourse, I was aiming for the top. Back then, after my engagement was announced, I was swept up in a whirlwind of D.C. society, attending endless networking events and galas, puffed up with pride from the constant stream of congratulations. Just like Caleb was now. "You should really get out there more, Leo," Caleb advised, looking at me seriously. "Meet some of our new colleagues. D.C. isn't just about being book smart. It's about who you know. You need to build a network." "The final interviews are just a few days away, Caleb," I replied. "Maybe you should hit the books. There will be plenty of time for networking later." Yeah, I know," he said, cutting me off. I'll review my notes after the think tank gala tonight. The dismissiveness in his tone was unmistakable. As he was about to leave, he turned back. Leo, Ethan Reed is going to be at this thing tonight. You know, the Reed from Boston. Are you absolutely sure you don't want to come? I shook my head. You know, I've never been a fan of those events, Caleb. I just bring the mood down. You go have fun. He shot me a look of exasperated pity, shook his head, and left. I watched him go, a thought crossing my mind. Is this engagement to the marshals really having this much of an effect on him? As expected, Caleb continued to spend his nights at parties and mixers. After that day, I rarely tried to talk him out of it. The day before our final oral assessments, Caleb found me. Leo, I've got some intel for you, he said, a sly grin on his face. I raised an eyebrow. What kind of intel? The president is new, and he's looking to make his mark, Caleb said with a triumphant smirk. He wants to see some bold, aggressive policy proposals. This is our chance to stand out. A chill went down my spine. How do you know that? I asked, my gaze sharp. Caleb leaned in conspiratorially. The Secretary of Defense's son was at the party last night. He let it slip. The secretary's daughter is one of the president's most trusted advisors. A tip from that family has to be solid, right? I studied Caleb for a moment, testing the waters. If that news gets out, everyone's presentations are going to be hawkish and aggressive. Maybe you should play it safe? Offer a more measured approach. Caleb looked at me, baffled. The president is looking for decisive action. Why would you be so cautious and miss a golden opportunity like this? We parted on a sour note. The new president was indeed looking to make his mark. What Caleb didn't know was that the candidates who caught the president's eye with their aggressive posturing would become pawns in his power struggle against the old guard at his own party. Pawns like me in my first life. So, on the day of my final assessment, while my policy proposal had the confidence of a young man on the cusp of success, it was deliberately free of the sharp, aggressive edge the president was supposedly looking for. A week later, the final rankings were announced. By order of the President of the United States, for the Foreign Service Officer Class of 2025, ranked number 1 on the register. From Columbus, Ohio, Caleb Vance. Caleb is number 1? An icy dread filled me. In my previous life, Caleb had been in the second tier. The number 1 spot had gone to a kid from a working-class family, whose policy paper was all fire and fury. Ranked number 2. From Boston, Massachusetts, Ethan Reed. That part hadn't changed. Ethan's placement was a compromise between the president and the party establishment. His presentation had been impeccably moderate and balanced. Ranked number 3. From Charleston, South Carolina, Leo Hayes. Hearing my name, I paused for a fraction of a second before stepping forward, taking my place in line behind Caleb. The man who had been number 1 in my past life, David Chun, was announced as number 2 this time. His features were sharp, chiseled, a reflection of the fierce ambition in his eyes. After the ceremony came the press event, a photo op, and a short procession for the media. Halfway through, a single red rose was tossed from a balcony above, and Caleb caught it perfectly. He caught it. The familiar voice made me look up. There was Chloe, her face lit up with a joyful smile. Her eyes locked with Caleb's in a moment of shared intimacy. Congratulations, Caleb. Ethan Reed, standing next to me, clapped him on the shoulder. Top of the register, and a wedding on the horizon. A double victory. Don't forget to invite me. Caleb laughed heartily. Ethan, the same to you. So, our number 3 officer, Ethan said, turning the conversation to me. Are you spoken for? Before I could answer, Caleb jumped in. If you know any suitable ladies, Ethan, feel free to make an introduction for Leo here. Ethan grinned. I might have someone in mind, but it depends on whether Leo is interested. I appreciate the thought, Ethan, I said smoothly. While I'm not engaged, I do already have my heart set on someone. I'm afraid I'll have to decline your kind offer. Oh, and who's the lucky lady who's captured your attention? Caleb asked, his curiosity piqued. Seeing the probing looks, I just smiled. It's still early days. I wouldn't want to tarnish a lady's reputation by speaking out of turn. Ethan chuckled. The way you protect her honor just makes me more curious. Back at our apartment, Caleb cornered me. You were just making that up, weren't you? You never go out. Where would you have even met someone? You're out at galas every night. How would you know? I replied with a weary smile. But no, I'm serious. Ife mit Shimwin. Caleb grinned. Well then, I'll be waiting for the good news. I just smiled and nodded. I wasn't lying. There was someone. She just wasn't in D.C. at the moment. The reception for the new officers was a lavish affair. Drawing on my memories from my first life, I made a point of introducing myself to a few people who I knew would later become major figures in the State Department. The conversations were surprisingly pleasant. When the president and several senior officials arrived, the party's atmosphere shifted, becoming more formal. A few of the new officers were asked to give impromptu remarks. I offered a short, unremarkable toast that drew polite applause. Thankfully, no one challenged me or suggested my high ranking was undeserved. But just when I thought I was in the clear, the unexpected happened. As I was about to return to my seat, the president called out to me. "Mr. Hayes," he said, a thoughtful smile on his face. "You're quite young. Do you have a middle name you go by?" My heart skipped a beat. I straightened up and replied, "No, Mr. President, I do not." There's a line from the poet Auden. "Look, stranger, on this island now." A definite shore. It speaks of clarity and purpose. The president's smile widened. "How about it? Leo Shore Hayes. What do you think?" I bowed my head slightly, my mind racing. "Leo S. Hayes. Thank you, Mr. President." "I'm honored." I saw the shrewd, calculating look in his eyes and understood. Once we were in the game, there was no staying on the sidelines. After returning to D.C. from a visit to my family back home, I walked into my new office at the State Department for the first time and immediately sensed the political currents swirling around me. The policy planning staff, the department's internal think tank, was anything but a quiet place for academics. Even though you three were at the top of the register, remember that a new class of officers comes through every year. This department is never short on top-ranked talent. Director Armstrong, the head of the staff, told me, "Caleb and Ethan." His words were heavy with meaning. "You're new to this world. Your job right now is to watch, listen, and learn." "Yes, sir. We understand," we chorused. After dismissing us, we found our shared office, where a senior analyst was already waiting. It was Mr. Wallace, a sharp, meticulous man who, I knew, would eventually take over as director after Armstrong joined the president's cabinet. "This is the file on the previous administration's North African intervention," Wallace said, handing us a thick stack of binders. "Your first assignment is to review it and compile the official historical record of the final years of the conflict." He looked at us sternly. "The official history has already been written, but this part remains unfinished. If you can complete it successfully, it could be a significant opportunity." After Wallace left, Caleb frowned. "What kind of opportunity? If it's so great, why hasn't he done it himself?" Ethan sneered. "Because the end of that conflict was a complete disaster. It's a thankless, politically explosive job. I heard this is the 23rd attempt to write this section." "Sounds to me like he's just trying to screw us over," Caleb muttered. "And what if he is?" I said quietly, "When you're the low man on the totem pole, you learn to do what you're told." I went to Caleb's wedding. As I watched Chloe, on the arm of her father, walk down the aisle, a bitter smile touched my lips. "You got your wish, Chloe." But just as in my first life, very few of our senior colleagues from the department showed up. Even with Caleb's superior social skills, the guest list was thin. I scanned the room and saw that most of the attendees were career officials stuck in mid-level positions, counting the days until they could get a quiet post overseas. Only later did I understand. I had been naive, and so had Senator Marshall. It was about the clash of old power and new ambition. The senator wanted to force his family into a new sphere of influence, but the established D.C. political class wasn't going to make it easy. After the wedding, Caleb's popularity at the office took a nosedive. A year later, he finally managed to secure a transfer out of the State Department, taking a position at the Department of Commerce. And so, of the top 3 from our year, I was the only one left on the policy planning staff. Ethan, with his family connections, and an uncle who was a deputy attorney general, had long since moved to a high-profile role in the Inspector General's office. Even David Chun, who had also been in our fellowship program, had already moved on to the Treasury Department. The whispers and rumors around the office grew louder. Sometimes I was tempted to stir up some drama myself, just to get a transfer out. But then I'd remember the consequences from my first life, and the thought would vanish. I simply put my head down and continued the painstaking work of compiling the historical report. "You've got a steady hand for someone so young, Mr. Wallace remarked in the early spring of 2028 after I submitted the final draft of the report to him. By then, he had been promoted to director. "Get ready," he told me. "You're coming with me to the White House tomorrow." "Yes, sir. Thank you for the opportunity," I said, bowing my head. Wallace looked at me and smiled faintly. "At your age, it's okay to show a little more ambition." Wallace was one of the president's closest advisors. His words sent my mind racing. The next day, I followed him into the West Wing, announcing Director Wallace of the policy planning staff and Mr. Leo Hayes. I trailed Wallace into the Oval Office and stood at attention. "What brings you here, Wallace?" the president asked, looking up from his desk. Wallace presented my report. "Mr. President, the official history of the North African conflict is complete. I've brought it for your review." The president put down his pen and took the report from his chief of staff, flipping through it carefully. After a long silence, he said, "So, there's still someone at state who knows how to write an objective history. I assume it's the work of the young man behind you." "Yes, Mr. President." The report was compiled by Mr. Hayes, Wallace replied. At Wallace's subtle nod, I stepped forward. "Mr. Leo Hayes, Mr. President. It's an honor." I kept my head slightly bowed, feeling the president's intense gaze on me. "I remember you," the president said, a hint of interest in his voice. "You were number 3 from the 25 class, weren't you? I'm the one who suggested your middle initial. Leo S. Hayes." He tapped the report. "This history has been rewritten more than 20 times. It's rare to find someone with such an impartial perspective." "You're too kind, Mr. President," I replied. "I was merely reporting the facts as they occurred." "A rare quality indeed," the president said with a small smile. "We'll consider this the final, official version. For your excellent work, you are promoted to Senior Policy Advisor." "Thank you, Mr. President. I'm deeply grateful." Moments after Wallace and I returned to the State Department, an aide from the White House arrived with the official notice of my promotion. Along with it came a gift, a case of rare Napa Valley wine and several designer silk ties. "Congratulations, Mr. Hayes. That wine is from a new shipment from the president's personal vineyard. You certainly have his attention. Let us know how we can help in your new role." After work, I ran into Caleb. "Leo, congratulations," he said, clapping me on the back. "Hey, my wife's family just sent up some fresh asparagus from their farm. I know you love that stuff. Want to come over for dinner?" Hearing him mention Chloe, I felt a strange sense of detachment. "It's good of you to remember, Caleb." "Sure, I'd be happy to." Since Caleb had transferred out, we still met for drinks occasionally, but a distance had grown between us. Our conversations usually consisted of him complaining about the stress of his job at Commerce, the pressure from his superiors, the backstabbing. When I arrived at his Georgetown townhouse, I saw Chloe, who was now a mother. Her assistant was holding their son, who was a little over a year old. "Honey, you're home. Did you have a good day?" she asked, her voice tinged with an almost imperceptible sycophancy. "Leo got a big promotion today," Caleb announced, waving a hand dismissively as she came forward to greet him. "Tell the kitchen to make a few dishes with that asparagus we got yesterday." "Of course. I'll go see to it right away," Chloe said, giving me a polite nod before disappearing. Caleb played with his son for a moment, then had the assistant take him away. "So, Leo, when are you finally getting married?" he asked with a laugh. "My kid will be running around before you know it." I was taken aback for a moment. "No rush. I just turned 26 last year." "Ah, so you were just stringing me and Ethan along back then," he chuckled. I just smiled without replying. In just a little while, the woman I had in mind would be arriving in D.C. During dinner, I discovered that Caleb now had 2 other women living in a house, both pregnant. One was Chloe's former assistant, Brenda. The other was Caleb's distant cousin. I watched Chloe hold her son, forcing a smile as Caleb's cousin made snide remarks at her expense. A contemptuous smirk formed on my lips. "Is this what you wanted, Chloe?" In my first life with Chloe, whether because of my own principles or out of respect for her, I never even considered having an affair. Our home was a sanctuary free from drama. She was the object of envy among the wives of D.C., but it wasn't enough for her. She had it all and still wanted more. That winter, news came from the north. The celebrated General Thorne had passed away. His daughter, Ava, returned to D.C. with her younger brother, bringing her father's ashes home. The president himself attended the memorial service. A few weeks later, after I finished briefing the president on a policy paper, he asked me unexpectedly, "Leo, you're not married yet, are you?" "No, Mr. President," I replied. "What would you say to me arranging an introduction for you?" "A personal introduction from you, Mr. President, would be a great honor," I answered respectfully. He chuckled. "You'd agree without even asking which family it is?" I smiled. "Any young woman who has earned your personal esteem must be extraordinary." "You're a smooth one," the president laughed. "You've met General Thorne's eldest daughter, Ava, haven't you?" I felt my hand clench slightly under the table. "I saw her once, at the general's memorial service." The president nodded. Ava's marriage prospects were delayed while she was caring for her mother. "She's 24 now. Before he passed, the general wrote to me, asking me to help find a suitable match for her. I think the 2 of you would be a good fit." "Miss Thorne is an exceptional woman, of course," I began. "Marrying her would be an honor far beyond what I deserve. It's just that she—" "If you're interested, that's all that matters," the president interrupted. "I'll arrange the formal introduction soon." I quickly expressed my gratitude. Ava Thorne, General Thorne's eldest daughter. She was the one I had been waiting for. In my past life, Ava had been matched with the number 3 officer from the class after mine, another young man from a humble background. But less than a year after their wedding, he was implicated in a corruption scandal at the Treasury Department, and the fallout dragged the entire Thorne family down with him. They lost everything. The next day, the official invitation from the White House arrived. A dinner to introduce us was scheduled for the following week. Leo, congratulations. Caleb cornered me as soon as I left the office. General Thorne may be gone, but he was a favorite of the president. This connection will be a huge boost for your career. I just smiled. General Thorne was indeed respected by the president, but was it because of some deep, sentimental bond? Unlikely. Otherwise, his family wouldn't have been so thoroughly destroyed in my past life. There were plenty of eligible men from powerful D.C. families. Why did the president keep choosing promising outsiders for the general's daughter? The general's young son, I'd heard, had always been frail, with no hope of a military career. My parents flew in from Ohio after the new year and threw themselves into planning the wedding. Though we came from a modest background, I wasn't short on cash. I had been writing and publishing a series of popular political thrillers under a pseudonym, and the royalties were substantial. On the day of the wedding, the First Lady sent a personal gift, sparking a wave of whispers and envious glances from the other guests. The day after we returned from our honeymoon, I was summoned to the White House. Stay on as a senior advisor here, or take a field assignment. The choice is yours, the president said, watching me closely. My choice was the field assignment. As I expected, I saw a look of approval in the president's eyes. Good. Pack your bags. You're going to Stanton, Texas, as the acting deputy director for the Regional Joint Task Force, he commanded. So the rumors were true. Director Wallace had mentioned that the deputy director position in Stanton was open, but I never imagined it would fall to me. It's a promotion in rank, even if it's an acting title for now. It's not unheard of, Wallace had told me. Look at anyone who's ever made it to the cabinet or a major ambassadorship. They all have experience in the field. I nodded in understanding. I went home and discussed the move with Ava. Stanton, she asked, surprised. Do you know what happened to the last deputy director there? He was killed in an ambush. I know, I nodded. Director Wallace mentioned it. And you still want to go? She asked, her brow furrowed with worry. I let out a small laugh. This wasn't exactly my choice. The assignment came directly from the president. Ava fell silent, processing this for a long moment. If you hadn't married me, she said finally, he probably wouldn't be sending you there. Don't say that, I said, pulling her close. This has nothing to do with you. The president wants to test me, that's all. Besides, D.C. is a political minefield right now. It's better to be out of the city. Tomorrow, Ava replied, her voice firm, I'll go to my family's storage and find my father's old strategy manuals and journals for you. I nodded. D.C. is no place for your brother right now, either. He's too young. Let's bring him with us to Stanton. I was thinking of the impending Treasury scandal, knowing that many of the families involved were old friends of her father's who would undoubtedly come asking for favors. He's not cut out for the military, but I think he has a real talent for academics. He and my younger sister could study together. After a moment's hesitation, Ava agreed. The deputy director position in Stanton was unlike any other. In addition to the usual administrative duties, it involved overseeing a massive sector of the border, managing the construction of defensive fortifications, coordinating troop deployments, and running surveillance operations. When I first arrived, it was pure chaos. Fortunately, Ava, with her military upbringing, was an invaluable source of advice and support. That July, the Treasury Department corruption scandal finally broke wide open. I sat in my office, reading the encrypted communiques from D.C., my eyes scanning the long list of names of those who had been indicted, arrested, or forced to resign. Even though I knew it was coming, a cold sweat ran down my back. How could it have implicated so many people? Ava said, her voice trembling as she read the list over my shoulder. Thank God you chose to leave the city when you did. These people, they were insane. Did you look at the list closely? She asked, her brow tightening. I glanced at it. Why? I asked, looking up. She pointed to 2 names near the bottom, Senator Marshall and Caleb Vance. My vision narrowed. I sat in silence for a long time, trying to understand how they had gotten entangled in it. Their sentence is lighter, at least, Ava said softly, trying to comfort me. Probation and relocation to Stanton. You might be able to look out for them a little. I nodded slowly. Compared to the others who were facing prison time, they were lucky. When Caleb arrived in Stanton to begin his court-mandated relocation, I arranged to meet him under the pretense of a routine inspection. I didn't take any bribes, he sobbed, his voice cracking as he grabbed my arm. But my boss was corrupt. My colleagues were corrupt. Even my subordinates were on the take. What was I supposed to do? I looked the other way, and even then they pushed me out. My brother-in-law, he choked out, "That idiot used me to get close to my boss, then spent the whole time behind my back calling me a fool." He cried for hours. All I could do was sit with him, offer what little comfort I could, and leave him some money. I later quietly asked one of my men to make sure his family wasn't harassed. I watched Chloe, her face etched with exhaustion, help a drunken Caleb back to their small, government-subsidized house. She bustled around, tidying up after him while also trying to manage their young son. I couldn't put a name to the feeling in my chest. All I could think was that she had gotten exactly what she had asked for. The road she was on was the one she had chosen. In the winter of 2029, insurgent forces from across the border launched a major series of raids. Fortunately, I had anticipated it and fortified our positions. We didn't face the main enemy force, but we repelled several attacks, and I was credited with a minor victory. The acting part of my title was officially removed. In 2031, the director of the Stanton Task Force was reassigned, and I was promoted to take his place. That same year, the insurgents returned, this time throwing their main force directly at the city of Stanton. Though we held the line until reinforcements arrived, the cost was staggering. The city was a landscape of death and destruction. In the end, the insurgents agreed to a ceasefire, and the president authorized the opening of a formal cross-border trade zone in Stanton to stabilize the region. In 2033, after a new round of administration reviews, I received an executive order from the president. After 4 years in the field, I was being recalled to D.C. for a senior post. Before I left, I went to see Caleb one last time. He had been wounded in the last big battle, losing an arm. His cousin had been killed in the fighting. Brenda had been sold off as an indentured servant to pay his debts. Only Chloe remained, caring for him and their children. Her body was skeletal, her skin sallow. Her eyes, once so bright and full of life, were dull and numb. As I walked away, I knew this was the last time we would ever see each other. Epilogue. Chloe I was the daughter of Senator Marshall, raised from birth in a cocoon of privilege and adoration. The day I turned 18, my father sat me down and told me that for the future of the Marshall family, for its pivot from military history to diplomatic legacy, I had to marry a brilliant young man from humble background. That, he explained, was why he had hired the best tutors, the most accomplished female mentors to shape me. It was in that moment that I understood. As much as my father loved me, I was ultimately a pawn for the family's future. He told me to go to the posting of the Foreign Service Officer Register and pick a husband. It was, in his mind, a generous way of giving me a choice. The day the list was posted, I stood with my family staff, and my eyes immediately fell on the man at the top of the list. I told my assistant Brenda to have our men surround him, but I never expected him to shove his friend forward as a decoy. And just like that, I was married to Leo Hayes. After the wedding, I buried my feelings and played the part of a devoted wife, just as my mentors had taught me. But as time went on, I grew restless. My husband had no mistresses. I was the envy of every wife in Washington. And still, I was miserable. On my deathbed, I told him, "If there's a next life, Leo, please don't stand in Caleb's way, okay?" As my consciousness faded, a cruel sense of satisfaction washed over me. I remembered everything the moment I woke up. It was the day of the register posting again. I looked across the street and saw Leo sitting in the window of a restaurant, not going down to the street. In that instant, I knew he had come back too. A wave of euphoria washed over me. If Leo wasn't in the running, did that mean I had a chance to be with Caleb? Everything went according to my dream. I married Caleb Vance. It was the only thing I had ever wanted in this life and the last. For a while, we were happy. It was a sweet, intoxicating time. Then I got pregnant. Caleb's mother sent his distant cousin to D.C. to live with us as his mistress. That was the first time Caleb and I fought. I ran home to my parents, but my mother told me I needed to be more tolerant. "It's perfectly normal for a man to have a few women on the side," she said. "Where will you find a man who doesn't?" I know one. I wanted to scream. He only had eyes for his wife and child. But I couldn't say it, because he wasn't the one I had chosen. A few days later, Caleb came to my parents' house, full of apologies and sweet promises, and I went back with him. My 2 nephews came along, too. They'd been studying with Caleb ever since we married. His cousin was now pregnant. So, either to spite him or to prove how magnanimous I was, I pushed my own assistant, Brenda, into his bed. The next time I saw Leo was at the dinner party Caleb threw to celebrate his promotion to senior policy advisor. I didn't want to see him, so I used the excuse of managing the household staff to stay away. But I couldn't avoid him forever. At dinner, the way Leo's gaze swept over Caleb's 2 mistresses filled me with a burning shame. After he left, I told Caleb I didn't want him entertaining guests at our home anymore. He could meet his friends and colleagues at clubs or restaurants. He didn't understand, but he agreed. After that, I didn't see Leo again. The next I heard of him, he was engaged to General Thorne's daughter by presidential arrangement. That night, Caleb got drunk, muttering about how envious he was, complaining that the Marshall family's influence couldn't compare to the legacy of General Thorne. I sat in a corner, rocking my son to sleep, and laughed coldly. Later, Leo took an assignment out of the city, and I felt a sense of relief, as if a great weight had been lifted. But our good fortune didn't last. My father's family and Caleb were both swept up in the Treasury corruption scandal. I don't know how it happened. With my memories of the past, I tried so hard to warn my husband and my father to steer them away from danger. How did things end up even worse than before? We were exiled to Stanton. It was the place where Leo was stationed, and there I saw him again. After that, my life became a daily struggle for survival. Then the insurgents attacked. The first time it wasn't so bad. Everyone said it was because Leo had been prepared. But the second time, their main army threw everything they had at the city. Stanton's defenses couldn't hold. In the chaos of the evacuation, Caleb lost his arm. His cousin was killed in the crossfire. Finally, reinforcements arrived, and the city was saved. But our family was broken. To make ends meet, I had to sell off Brenda's contract. To take care of Caleb and the children, I took on the kind of menial work I had once looked down upon. All just to stay alive. An order came from D.C., recalling Leo for a senior position in the administration. The last time I saw him, as he stood there, powerful and composed, a wave of regret so profound it almost buckled my knees washed over me. If only I could do it all over again.